Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar, we're going to be explaining account and user variables within doForms. We recently did a webinar explaining how to set up your account and user variables. So if you're here to learn how to set them up in the first place, please refer to that video in the How to Use section of the video library on the doForms website. I also just sent out the link to that video library in the chat, so everybody should have that. And underneath the How to Use, you'll see a user variable and mobile variable setup video. Today, we are going to focus on using the variables inside of your forms once they've already been set up. So like every other webinar, if anybody has any questions while I'm going through, I'm going to keep the questions tab opened, and I'll stop periodically if a question comes through and answers it as we go. So let's start with the account variables, and I'll just give you a little bit of background on what the account variables are. So in your Manage section of your portal, you will see the account variables underneath General. And basically, these are general information about your company that you don't want to have to retype over and over again on every single form. So for example, it's company name, the company's address, all that stuff. You know, you can put in license numbers, a tagline, put in your default tax rate. There's two checkboxes here for if you're going to be using some sort of mobile payment or using some sort of mobile printer. And then there's two kind of blank account variables that you can decide for yourself what they're for. So maybe you want to put a store location or a warehouse location or something along those lines. You can create two custom answers based off of any variables you want to set up. So these variables essentially can be referenced inside of your form by using a calculation. So there's a bunch of cool stuff that you can do with these account variables. I'm going to show you a couple today, but the concept remains the same across anything that you want to do with these variables. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to create a reusable form header. So at the top of most forms, it has the company's information, their phone number, fax number, their website, and maybe a tagline. So when you're creating your forms in doForms, instead of having to manually create that header over and over and over again for however many forms you might have, you can use these variables and then save it as a draft and basically import them in on every form you're about to use. So let's jump over to the form builder and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. So as you can see on my screen here, I just have a simple layout grid with 4 calculations. Now, these calculations, as you can see on the right-hand side, when I go to select, is it a number, a text, or a date and a time, depending on if I choose numeric or text, you'll see a different set of user and account variables in here. So you can see that all of those options that we just went through are in this drop-down list with the word account variable next to it. So what's going to happen if I choose company name here is it's going to automatically populate this field with the company name doForms. If I go down to the next one, I string together the address plus a space plus the city plus a space plus this should actually be state here, plus the zip code. And then on the next line down, I'm pointing to the phone number account variable, and on the last line, I'm pointing to the tagline account variable. So if I just go ahead and give this a preview real quick, you can see that it automatically filled in all the answers that I had filled in on that manage account variable screen. So now once I have this, I can save this as a draft. And then when I'm building new forms, I can go to the file, insert, and I can insert this at the top of every form before I start building. So that way, once you create this the one time, every time you go to create a new form, you don't have to redo all this work or retype in all this information. Each form will just reference those variables that you have already set up. So that's just a quick and easy example on how to use a reusable form header. I'm also going to show you, if I jump back to the account variables here, I had mentioned before that there was 2 checkboxes down here for using payment or using printer. So I'm going to show you an example here of a lot of times when you're going through and creating your forms, you might be in the process of figuring out if you're going to be using payment or if you're going to be using a printer. So instead of building your forms when you don't have these things, you can set them up as variables and basically set it up in your form to where the form can decipher if you have these things ready to go or not. So what I mean by that is I'm going to jump over here. And so since I have it checked, meaning yes, I am going to be using a mobile payment or a mobile printer, inside of my calculation, it's going to return if I point to one of these variables, which I'm actually going to open up a form I have here for the mobile printing variable. So instead of pointing to the company name and all of that, I'm going to set this calculation equal to the using printer account variable, and it's going to return a true or false value for me. Now, I know that this is just two fields inside of a form here, but just imagine this inside of any of the forms that you currently have at the end, right? So basically, I have a print button now that is set to only show up if mobile printing is set to true. So basically, if I go ahead and preview this now, since I have the checkbox on, it's going to say mobile printing is true, and it's going to show me the print button. But if I now go back and I turn off mobile printing, as you can see here, and I uncheck using the printer, and I can save that. Now, if I go ahead and preview, it's going to return a false value, and I'm going to have no print button. So you can essentially go in and configure all of your forms to be print or payment enabled, but just necessarily don't pop up unless you have it ready to go. So you have full control instead of having to go back, edit your forms, and now add in a printing or a payment capability. You could just kind of have it in your form, and it's just hidden until this variable is turned on. Any questions so far on the user variables? So basically, as you're going through and building a form, I'll just go ahead and do a new here and throw in a calculation just to kind of give you an example of all of the different variables you can get. So underneath the numeric, you can grab the tax rate. So for example, if you had a default tax rate that you used on every one of your work orders or your invoices, you could set up for New Jersey, where we are at 7%. And basically, you wouldn't have to enter in that every time that you went through and tried to send somebody an invoice. It would just reference that account variable and see that this account is set up to 7% tax at all times. And it will do do all the math for you, and you don't have to basically change or re-enter that information every time you do an invoice. On the text, you can reference any other account variable. So the ones that we went over, the company information, the fax, the payment and printer, and then your two custom ones down here. And you can, string these together. So like I did with the address, the city, the state, and the zip, you can combine phone number and fax number or the website. You can do any number of combinations of these variables inside of your forms by pointing them to the calculations. So I think that is all for the account variables. Just to remind everybody, those account variables are underneath the Manage section, underneath General, and under Account Variables. And you can come in here and you can, as you can see, I left a couple blank, so they are not required. You don't have to fill out all of them if you're not going to use all of them. But you can fill out the ones that make sense to you. So next, I'm going to take a look at user variables, which are not the same as account variables. So account variables apply to everybody in your account. It's not user specific. The user variables are specific to each mobile employee. So basically, each mobile employee can have their own set of these variables, and they can be customized. So also under the general section right above account variables is user variables. So I'm going to jump over to the mobile users because that's what I have set up in my account here. And you can see I already have three variables set up: their name, their email address, and their home address, right? And then you choose the type of field that it is. So name is a text field, email address is an email address, and home address is a text. And then there's three settings to the side over here that I'll quickly glance over. But like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there's a whole setup video in our doForms library that goes into more detail on all of this. But basically asks the mobile employee when they either connect for the first time or the next time that they update their mobile app. Edit allows the mobile user to edit it after he's already put in his name, email, and home address. If he needs to change something, he has that capability on the mobile. And the syncs it back and forth between the website and the mobile app. So if you don't want the mobile user to have control of this, you can take off ask, edit, and sync. Just ask and edit, and you can fill it out on their mobile user in the manage mobile user settings, and a web user can fill that out for them. And as long as the sync is still on, it will sync those answers down to their tablet for them. If you don't care, if you want the employees to do it themselves, turn on the ask and edit. And I'll show you an example of this in a second. So I'm actually going to bring up a mobile device here that as soon as I went and updated my account, as soon as I added these variables, because I didn't previously have them. So if you don't previously have them set up, but you set them up at a later time, the next time the mobile user does an update, they will basically be taken to a screen that kind of looks like this. Now, these are required. So now I cannot advance to get back to my forms until I answer these questions. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill out these couple of questions here. So I'm going to fill out my name. I'm going to fill out my email address. And I'm going to fill out my home address. So now I can go, it'll save my data, it's going to update my variables, and now you can see in here, since I have the edit on, I know the screen's a little bit fuzzy sharing it here, but bear with me. Since I have that edit capability on, I can now come back into this area of my drop-down menu called My Info, and I can customize these. So if, for instance, my email address changes tomorrow, since I have the edit capability, I can come in here and change this at whatever time. But once you're done, you can just jump back to your forms. And now these variables, just like the account variables, are referenceable inside of calculations. So the first example I'm going to show you is how you can set up a user's address and set up directions that will always get them home no matter where they are in the field. So the way that we would do this is I'm going to open up a form that I've created called home address. And basically what we went and did here was I set the home address equal to var. So not to be confused with the account variables at the end. The user variables start with this var underscore and then whatever the question was. So in this example, I set it to var home address. And then I just set an action button to launch Google Maps based off of an address. So what this is going to do is, since each employee, when they log in, and these variables are not unique to everybody, each employee, when they log in and set up their variables, is going to have their own home address. So what's going to happen on the mobile devices, when they open up a form that is referencing this address, it's going to automatically put it in there for them. And then this action button is going to let them launch right to Google Maps and launch them right to get home. So I'm going to bring up the mobile device here in just 1 second. And like I said, I know the mobile is a little bit fuzzy. I'm trying to share the tablet here. Looks like it got a little bit more clear now, but I am going to go down to the home address form. And you will notice that the 12 Sweetbriar Drive in Clark, New Jersey, which is the address I had filled out in my variables, is in there. You can also see, like I mentioned earlier, if I go to my mobile app users, all the information that I had entered for my variables, once I've updated my app, also gets synced back to the portal here. So you will see my name, email address, and home address synced back to the portal after I went ahead and filled them out. But now jumping back to the mobile, I can click the Go Home button. It's going to capture the location I'm currently at, and it's going to launch Google Maps and give me driving directions back to my home address. So now you can then copy and paste this into any of your forms, and basically anytime your employee is out in the field, you have a nice little easy quick way to either get them back to their home address or back to the office or back to the warehouse or whatever the case may be. So moving along here, the next example I'm going to show you is how to use a user variable to do a conditional lookup against a data source. So what we mean by this is, let's say, for example, I had a drop-down list of people's names and the location that they're supposed to be at. I can open up this form here that I've already pre-set up, or the job site, excuse me, the job site that they're supposed to be at. So what I can do, and like I've said on the couple of other forms that we've gone to, I know there's only 2 fields in here, but just imagine this, plugged in anywhere in your current forms. So what I did here is I set the first name equal to the var name, which is my variable field name for myself. And then basically what I have here is a job site lookup that has a drop down of different job sites. And I'm setting a condition where the name from the calculation equals the name from my document, automatically put their job site in there for them. So that way they don't have to select it from a drop-down list or search for it or anything like that. So if I jump back over to the mobile here, I'm going to back out of these driving directions. And I'm going to open up this form on my mobile device. And you'll notice as soon as the form opens, and I know it's a little bit blurry, but it automatically put my name in there, and then my job site is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, I could have done this with unlimited number of columns in my document, so I could have put my job site, my address, my hourly pay rate, my the last time I worked, whatever other information you have in here. And you can even do multiple conditions where the name and the person's email address need to be the same, because maybe 2 people have the same first or last names. So you can combine anything like that and basically set up a condition where it will automatically set the job site or any other information in your device by basically just filling out this name one time, referencing it in your calculation, and then setting up a lookup condition on it. Any questions so far on these two? The next thing that I'm going to show you is not so much mobile or account variables, but just to jump back and kind of finish off with the user variables here. There are variables for web users and for mobile users. Mobile users are probably more common, but basically just to kind of show you how I'd add a new one, you click on this little pen in here, and then let's say I had a office location. And I wanted this to be a text, and then I would click Ask, Edit, and Sync. So now, even though I have already set up a couple variables, if I add a new one on the mobile app the next time I update, since there's no office location for any one of my employees, it's going to automatically bring them to that office location, just like it did with the name, email address, and home address on the last example that I did, since it's not filled out yet. And then once they fill it out, now that information will now be referenceable inside of a calculation as well. So basically in your form builder, any one of these variables, including the account variables, are all available depending on the type they are, a numeric or a text, or a date and field for that matter. And the key differentiator is the user variables, which are specific to each mobile user variable or mobile user in your account, are started with VAR underscore, whereas your account, which is applied to everybody in your account, they're on the right-hand side with account variable inside the brackets there. So the last thing that I want to go over is not user or account variables, but it's just being able to pass data between forms or pass variables between forms. So basically, let's say, for example, I have form A and form B. And basically, form A is my intake form where I'm just taking down some of the customer information. And then form B is my work order where I'm actually going to be out in the field and, performing some sort of work. So after you fill out, your initial paperwork, when you go into your work order, it's kind of cumbersome to have to fill out the customer's information, their address, your name, your email, your phone number, all again, since you've already filled it out on your first form, form A. So what we've created in doForms is a way to, and you have two different options with this. You can open up a form using an action button, open form, and you can send values to that form. So what that means is I'm going to send the name from this form to the name on form B, the email, the phone number, just the same. And then you can also return values. I don't have any return values set up at the moment, but basically if you wanted to return like a invoice total or a work order total or something like that back to your original form, you could just click on the return values and select the field from form B that you want to send to form A. You can also, instead of opening the form, because what happens when you open the form is form A stays open while you complete form B, and then it jumps you back after form B is completed with any of the return variables you have. But let's say you didn't need to jump back or return anything to form A. Instead of using open form, you can use the save, send, and load selected form and use the same send and return variables. So I'm going to give you a little example here on my mobile device, So I'm going to open up Form A, and you can see on my device, just to kind of show you, I won't fill anything out, but Form A just has these 3 questions on it. And then Form B has those 3 questions, but then some more information about when they arrived, departed, work performed, and a signature. So what's going to happen is once I fill out Form A, I'm going to put in the customer's name was Lauren Callis. Her email is lcallis@doforms.com. And her phone number is 908-505-9020. So now if I click on my open work order, it's going to save my initial form, and it's going to open up Form B and transfer the values over for Lauren's name, her email, and her phone number. Then I'm free to say that I arrived on site today and I departed tomorrow. I departed tomorrow. Work performed. You can, type in whatever you need to. Capture the customer's signature. and submit the form. And you'll notice once the form is submitted, it's going to jump you back to the initial form, Form A, with all the information that right where you left off, essentially. Now, like I said, if you don't need to come back to this form, don't use the open form action button. Use the save, send, and reload a new form, and just set up the send and return. There will be no return values since you're submitting your initial form, but you will still be able to send values. So essentially, if you're not looking to return anything from the secondary form, you should use the save, send, and reload form. But if you do need to return some stuff, so for example, if on here, maybe I had a blank field that said, work order total, and I wanted to return the total amount after the customer signed off on it, I could then return that back to this form and now submit my initial form back into the portal there. Aside from those types of passing, we also can pass information to some payment processors. So for example, on your mobile app, I don't have a demo of this set up live here, but I'm just going to speak to it. And if anybody has any additional questions on this, I'll throw myself and the support team's email addresses into the chat right now. And you guys can always feel free to shoot me an email or shoot support an email on more information on any of these two. But we have two payment vendors. So we have ProPay and Square. And basically what you can do in them is send values from your form for how much you want to charge. And you can return how much was actually accepted, as well as some transactional information. And you can also trigger receipts right from within there. So on your ProPay or your Square account, you can actually load them right into doForms using our payment widgets. And using our regular forms, our forms can pass the values that Square and ProPay need to process payments, and including the amount that you're going to charge and some other information, the customer's information, such as their name and email address and those kind of things. It actually passes that information over to these payment processing companies, and then lets you run a transaction, and then kicks you back some information from their system about how much was actually charged, as well as some transactional information. So that's all that we really have on using variables inside of your forms today. If anybody has any additional questions, please shoot an email to my email, atrainee@doforms.com, or support@doforms.com. I just sent them both into the chat. I also sent the doForms video library, which is relatively new in the last couple of weeks or so, that has, I'll actually bring it up for everybody to kind of review it real quick while we have an opportunity. So it allows you to, and if you've registered for this, you've probably seen this already. But basically, we have a live webinar running every week, so you can register for these on here, as well as in the how to use, for example, here's the user variables that I had set up on how to set those up. So basically, you can launch this video and kind of take a step behind what we went over today, and that kind of walks you through how you set up these variables and a little bit more information on that. So if anybody has any questions, which it doesn't look like they do. Okay, guys, I'm going to end the webinar today. Thank you very much for coming out, and I hope to see you again next week. Thanks. Bye.